everyone, I'm Hannah Lloyd.
And I'm Charlotte Gilfillan.
Welcome to our podcast, Women in Wellies.
Each episode, we will be inviting a guest to share their stories, experiences and lessons of working and living in rural Scotland.
We want to get to know the real women behind the Wellies and share them with you, our listeners.
This episode is sponsored by the Landed Estates and Rural Business Team at Henderson Logie Chartered Accountants.
Hello and welcome to episode 15 of the Women in Wellies podcast. This week we are joined by Laura Warrender. Laura, thank you for joining us. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Very flattered that you've asked me to be here. Definitely feel like a woman in one welly rather than a woman in two.
That would give you a very funny gait as you walked.
Don't think I've graduated to be able to wear both, but
we'll see. So Laura, can you kick us off by telling us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so I am a partner in Minuntion Pinclanty Farms, which alongside my husband Jack and his parents Johnny and Fiona Warrender. Minuntion's a hill farm and a sporting estate in the Stenshire Valley in South Ayrshire. I'm also a board member of Scottish Land Estates, SLE, which is a membership organisation who support rural businesses and represents their members' views to politicians and any other decision maker who can be lobbied. I am a trustee of the Galloway and South Ayrshire Biosphere Reserve, which is a landscape designation from UNESCO. And I am also a mum of 3 children who are 6, 3 and 1.
So you've got your hands full, basically, in summary.
Definitely.
And Laura, while you're a partner in the estate today, you didn't always kind of have that kind of route and estate in mind probably before you met Jack. What did you do before you ran a rural business?
Yeah, so before I've got kind of Scottish roots, but I didn't actually grow up in Scotland. My great grandfather was a novelist who wrote a lot about Scotland. He invented the McNab, which is quite cool if you're into that kind of thing. And so I grew up obviously coming to Scotland and reading a lot about Scotland, but didn't imagine actually ending up here. I came to university here. I was a kind of bookish kid who wanted to visit castles and do brass rubbings in medieval churches in my free time. And I did a literature degree and then I went into television. I started off as a researcher and then I became a producer of sort of history and arts documentaries. So I worked with historians and academics and the odd kind of music star, making documentaries mostly for the BBC, which I was doing when I met my husband Jack, who also makes documentaries as well. And he mentioned the Wet Hill Farm in South Ayrshire. And I thought, yeah, sounds kind of cool.
You were like, that's me, sold.
Yeah, it really was. I said to him that I'd always fancied the idea of having like a flock of sheep. And he was like, well, okay, yeah, we can do that. Maybe like a few more than just a flock, but come and have a look. So that was a few years ago, and now here I am.
The rest is history. I think it's really cool, Laura, that you used to work in like TV and film, probably on documentaries that we've all watched, as if they were on the BBC, you know.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I worked with some sort of, I suppose, interesting kind of journalists like Jeremy Paxman and Andrew Marr. I made a film with Lady Gaga. That was a kind of blip from the out from the history books, which was good fun. And yeah, it was great. I mean, I traveled quite a bit, and it basically allowed me to spend lots of time on the phone, lots of time arguing, and lots of time reading, which was great when you're in your 20s. But when I came to having children, it was just not really practical for both of us to be traveling so much and working such long hours. And Minuntion, which is where Jack was brought up, was sort of looming on the horizon. And it's not a huge place, but it certainly is big enough to need one of us to kind of take it on full time. So I was up for it.
And you're in the process of kind of succession, which is something, Laura, you and I have spoken about extensively before because of what other things we're involved in. But how much of a challenge has it been for you, kind of facing that when you're not from, you didn't grow up on a hill farm, you've got, there's such a variety of interests on the estate.
Yeah, I mean, I've had so many challenges along the way, but I suppose from coming from not coming from a farming background, my grandfather, my mother's dad, farmed in Mid Wales in the Black Mountains, so I kind of grew up spending a lot of time there, but I never imagined that I would actually be living a sort of similar life to that. One of the first things that I did was I kind of packed myself off to SRUC in Ayr, and I did a year of the agriculture course. I did an HNC, which was great. I bought myself a boiler suit and tried to make friends with the 18-year-olds. It once asked me to a beach party and a night out in Furies, which is a nightclub in Ayr. So I thought, I've made it. But unfortunately, I had a 1-year-old at home, so I always had an excuse. But it was great because it was an opportunity to just to get a really good kind of grounding in an industry and a world that I really did not know much about at all. So I started with that, and then that meant that I could read pages of The Scottish Farmer and vaguely follow it, and show it as a badge to sort of skeptical middle-aged men. So I did that, and then and since being married to Jack, I've been kind of involved very kind of steadily in the partnership. So I was immediately like coming to farm meetings, and my parents-in-law were very kind of inclusive and said, what do you have time to get involved in, and what would you like to get involved in? So we have been lucky in that respect. We've had a really long kind of drawn out handover period, which has basically gone over about 5 years. So next year is when we will move there full time, and we will be really on the ground running things in a really hands-on way. No family has navigated succession and come out the end of it saying, we did that really well. I think shifting a balance between 2 generations is never going to be particularly straightforward, and everyone does it differently. But I think it's important that everyone keeps talking, and everyone is open and honest, and sort of, if in doubt, copy them into an email or pick up the phone and tell them your plans. We do have different priorities because we are at a different age, and we're living in a different world, and it would be sort of weird if we didn't. And we're also responding to different, climate and different political climate as well. But I do also think that it's helpful if you are in a sort of transition like we are, for everyone involved to be involved. And by that I mean that everyone to know what their project is or what their responsibilities are, and just be really clear on that, because otherwise I think you can find yourself, getting into kind of muddy water.
Laura, can you just tell us a little bit more about what you've got going on at Minuntion, because it's quite varied, which probably also gives you space for everyone to have their own kind of projects and their own things that they can own as you've gone through this 5-year transition.
Yeah, so Minuntion is it's diversified to the extent that it's made up of a sheep farming business, which we're in a contract farming agreement, which we have been for the last 18 years, and that's always been very successful. We have a forestry business, so we have some commercial forestry, and we have a lot of mixed woodland that's been planted over the years, which needs sort of gradual management. We have a little forest school area, which is used by a local kind of outward bound group as an outdoor classroom. 3 self-catering holiday cottages. There's salmon and sea trout in the River Stincher, the red and roe deer stalking in the valley and also on the edges of the Galloway forest, which we sort of border. We have quite a large pheasant shoot and days that we let. And kind of all in between that, we have various kind of conservation projects which are kind of ongoing, which are gamekeeper / stalker / ghillie. One man who does it all also leads on. So there's lots going on, but so yeah, as you say, there's lots for us all to get involved in.
And what would you say, Laura, is your favourite conservation project?
So there's a project which I wasn't involved in, but has been ongoing for a number of years, which is something that my parents-in-law started, which is all focused on the River Stincher, which runs through the middle of the valley, which runs pretty much straight the way through the estate, and gradually they are trying to restore the riverbank in the way that we're trying to push our fences back into the field and do quite a lot of riparian planting of native trees all along the riverbanks, because it's an enormous benefit to aquatic life and also all of the species that live alongside. When they bought the farm 30 years ago, no woods were fenced, the river wasn't fenced, there was actually very little woodland in the valley, and they have over the past 30 years done a pretty massive kind of restoration of it, and it's now a wooded, watery place, kind of teeming with wildlife. So I would love to continue that.
That sounds like an amazing project, Laura. Nice to be able to come in at a point and really see the benefits of keeping doing it, because I think sometimes we see a conservation project right at the beginning and people talk about it, but you don't see how it benefited 30 years on and why you should keep going down the river, because what that will be like in another 30 years and another 30 years. So that's really, really cool and nice that they've been able to do that all up the valley on the estate.
And there's also parts where we haven't yet done it, and also there are areas in the river where we don't own both sides. So we have neighbours where we would hope to try and encourage them to do the same, or possibly do a project together. I mean, I know the kind of outlook for, you can sometimes get a bit sort of bleak about how little we know about the kind of future of farming and what's happening with sort of biodiversity loss and climate change and all these things. But actually, I'm really excited about what we might be able to do, particularly if we are going to be encouraged to collaborate with our neighbours, because of course we can do as much as we like on our few thousand acres, but in the grand scheme of things, we need to be working as a whole valley if we really care about keeping our curlews or kind of improving the river. So something like that would be a good thing to focus on.
And is that kind of desire, Laura, for landscape scale change why you got involved in the Biosphere?
Yeah, so the Biosphere is it's a landscape designation which recognises that the area's sort of natural environment and its heritage, and it doesn't bring any rules or regulations. It's not like a national park, but really it encourages and facilitates sort of cooperation. So yes, I would say it's very much my style. It tries to sort of encourage conversations between groups and communities and businesses to do projects like this. And
they've just expanded, haven't they, the Biosphere?
Yeah, so it's just recently had its 10-year periodic review and been redesignated as a reserve, and we have expanded its boundary to include Alloway and the Rins of Galloway, and also 2 nautical miles of the marine environment, so actually going into the sea.
Laura, you're clearly very passionate about what you do and involved in some fantastic initiatives like the Biosphere, which has actually culminated in you being a finalist in the Rural Rising Star category at this year's Helping It Happen Awards from Scottish Land Estates. So congratulations.
Well, I was very surprised to be nominated, let alone shortlisted. So So particularly as the two women that I've been shortlisted alongside are sort of Caroline Miller and Claire Taylor are already stars, definitely. They ain't rising.
No, I think it's a very, very strong category, but congratulations. Yeah, really, really pleased to be becoming a finalist. On the topic of inspiration, then, you've mentioned previously about the forest school that you have. And obviously the fact that you have 3 children. How much are you inspired by trying to connect young people with nature and rural skills and, rural life?
Yeah, so my children are, a constant source of inspiration. I suppose what's exciting for me and for them is because I was not born here and have no kind of previous experience of living on a farm. We are almost discovering it together. So as I teach them, I'm learning myself. And I now look for things to explain to them. So whether it's sort of sitting and watching a hare run between her leverets, or going out to the river in the evening to try and see if we can see an otter, or sitting out on the hill waiting for the curlews. I mean, it's just all so exciting, and I really want to teach them obviously to love the land, but also to really understand it. And as far as other children are concerned, I mean, it's really rewarding to being able to bring children here, whether that's like through the forest school, or local schools, which I'd love to do a bit more of. But even just the children who come and stay in our holiday cottages, like, going to see them during their holiday and finding out what they've been doing and where they've been exploring and what they've seen, it is really exciting to be able to offer that. So I am very keen to try and bring in more young people, particularly from our area, in order to experience what a rural life is like. And now whether that could be through rural skills like hedge laying or diking, but we don't really have many dry stone walls, but it could be something like that, or just kind of first-hand experience of the roles of the people who work at Minuntion. So that could be our gamekeeper or a farmer, handyman, the variety of tasks that he does in his day. And that's where I'm quite intrigued by the Estates the Educate program, which would, I'd love if that kind of expanded and kind of ventured down our neck of the woods, because that's a really brilliant effort to kind of bring children closer to the work that these farms and estates do. Because it's, it does sometimes surprise me how disconnected children just even really, really nearby are, from whether it's Girvan or even our local village. Like, I think it would be a great thing to do more of.
No, definitely. I'm a huge fan of the Estates That Educate program. I think it's an absolutely phenomenal initiative and has obviously been incredibly well received. And if it could be rolled out even further, that would be fantastic. And you're right, I think there is this real disconnect. And I'm not convinced that the current curriculum in schools actually helps in any way. And there is a lot of good work going on. I mean, Royal Highland Education Trust, they're doing some phenomenal work as well about giving children access to particularly farms and understanding where their food comes from. But then I think as well, as we move towards as we require more green jobs, if you like, then we need the skills and the training to be able to support that. And I think as well, a lot of children perhaps don't understand the opportunities that there are on farms and estates and in the wider rural environment. So having that opportunity to come to somewhere like your estate and learn about that, and even to spark their interest.
I think what it would be great for anyone kind of who has a farm, has an estate, and feels like they can offer up any kind of sort of experience or even just a few hours to sort of make themselves known to like these organisations like Estates That Educate or Countryside Learning Scotland, and even like me just ringing up the local school or the college in Stranraer. We had a girl who came on work experience last year who wanted to be a gamekeeper, and she didn't come from a farming background at all or a gamekeeping background. And we just arranged, just her teacher got in touch and said, any chance? And we arranged a few days, and it was, and I think she really, really enjoyed it. Even seeing like young boys and girls in our beating line, like on a shoot day, and it's nice when there are shoot days that fall on the weekends, because then they're able to come to them. And we have done a couple of kind of training courses, which actually came through the village wind farm kind of community benefit fund, which is the sort of best way that this money could be spent. So we kind of hosted a number of training courses for like tractor driving and chainsawing and stuff, and that was a really good way to just get people who were local but keen to learn a skill. And a lot of those were young people.
So, having kind of fully immersed yourself into the rural world and particularly lands management, tell us what prompted you to join the Scottish Land Estates Board.
I'd been involved with SLE for a couple of years. I was obviously a member, and I really used them as a resource. I was one of those members who did actually ring the policy team members a lot, saying, "Please, can you give me some advice on this?" Particularly because I really didn't know, in many situations, kind of what I should be doing. So I was involved as a member, and then there was quite a push to start more work and more kind of focus on each region, and the region that we are in is called Clydeside, and they were looking for a chairman and I applied to be the chairman of that region. So as a regional chair, really you're there to kind of rally support. You're there to bring the members together and promote your members, arrange events. And it was a really good way actually for me to meet people, particularly like in our part of South West Scotland, and to see what other people were doing. Usually I'd then go and ask them for sort of endless amounts of advice, because I don't have a problem with asking for advice. So I was the chairman for the Clydeside region. I've been doing that for a couple of years. And through that, I was, I suppose, sort of slightly closer to the sort of coalface of what SLE are doing in Scotland. So when they were, I think, trying to diversify their board a bit, and invited myself and Michael Hume to join it. So we have come in as two young-ish things to hopefully add a new perspective.
And as part of that, you've developed a next gen group, haven't you?
Yeah. So Michael and I were talking, I think, probably about what was happening at the Hersal where he lives, and Douglas, and Minuntion where we are. And we came to the conclusion there must be a lot of people in a similar situation, slightly searching, probably feeling a bit isolated, because geographically we all are quite isolated. And we thought it would be a sort of helpful and fun exercise to try and bring people together who were all at a similar stage in either taking on a rural business or kind of just getting going in one. So we pulled all our contacts and spoke to as many people as possible, and we started a group which covers just the south of Scotland. But I think it's since sparked others elsewhere. And we meet every couple of months. We have kind of online evenings where we invite speakers to come and talk to us, or we might get a couple who are actually members of the group to kind of share with us their experience, their hopes and dreams. And we also we've had a couple of dinners which have been great. And I think everyone has, the kind of feedback has been really positive. Everyone's been amazingly honest. And lots of connections have been made because of it. And because of course it's great to be able to ask the older generation about their experiences and things, but actually in some situations, to be able to sort of look sideways and ask those who are really kind of in the thick of it, where the kind of experience is so much kind of fresher and rawer. is really valuable. I hope it will just continue to grow and the kind of network will expand. And what's good about it being online is that actually we've been able to include people who are, there's quite a wide age range, and we've been able to include people who are perhaps working away still, or for other reasons they have to work away, and so it's been great. It's been very kind of diverse group.
So, Laura, you've just shared with us like a huge range of what's got you to where you are today, what you're doing, loads of opportunities. But I'm sure along the way there's been like bumps in the road or things that have posed challenges. Are there any challenges that you're willing to like share and talk a little bit about?
Yes, I suppose the first challenge, because I had zero knowledge, was around language. I mean, it seems very simple to say that, but I started off by sitting in on farm meetings, and honestly, I did not really know. I couldn't really follow them. I was sort of writing words in the margin of my notepaper to sort of go home and Google, because I mean, who knew what gimmer was? So that was the initial challenge. But I suppose my kind of training as a researcher meant that I've always been very keen to learn. I've always been very keen on kind of facts and information. So I sort of applied that same sort of enthusiasm to the kind of world of rural Scotland. The difficulty I find, I suppose, with this is that you're not simply having to learn about one industry. I need to be able to follow what's going on in the forestry sector and in tourism and sporting and farming, and keep on top of shifting policy around all of those. And I suppose there have been frustrations in the time when that enthusiasm has been interpreted as naivety by people, and that does irritate me because frankly I'm just a few years behind, and a few experiences behind, but I'm quite determined to catch up.
I think it's really interesting, Laura, somebody who has also kind of come into the rural sector. People still say stuff and I'm like, I have no idea. I have no idea what that is. I have no idea what that means. And I'm like, you're frantically trying to remember the words to like look it up. And I remember being at an event and phoning Charlotte on my way home and asking her what a McNab is, because I'd never heard of it before. I had no idea. And I knew enough to know that the room I was in wasn't the place to ask that question. But I also knew that phone a friend, that's what it's all about. Phone a friend.
I have Jack. Jack is my phone a friend. So wherever he is in the world, he's usually quite good at replying to WhatsApp messages, as long as he's not sort of in the Arctic or but I often have to send him a message being like, what is this bird? And do I sound like an idiot writing this? And he keeps me straight.
As long as we've got those allies, those of us who are new to a sector can cope, can get by.
I would say the other challenge, to be completely honest, is that there are some times when I think I'm spreading myself too thin, and it would not be possible. Life would not be possible without the support that I get. So, and I mean that in relation to my children. So, we have a really kind of haphazard kind of childcare arrangement between nurseries and schools and help. And also I really rely on my parents-in-law a lot. And even my own parents, who are quite far away, are kind of often coming up and helping. And I've done sort of, there have been times where I've had to take babies to board meetings and sawmills and sort of inappropriate places, and have them under my desk whilst I'm trying to have a Zoom meeting. And not right now, actually, because they're all in bed, thankfully. But that's just the reality of being a kind of young mum. But I'm definitely very reliant on a lot of help.
Mm-hmm. I think it's really valuable to recognise that as somebody who had a sleeping baby of yours on me at an event last year. So you could just focus on the meeting, and I was just like rocking the baby at the back of the room. I know how much you value that, and I think being able to acknowledge that you couldn't do it without help is incredibly an incredibly important part of it, because Jack obviously is still traveling and filming and all of those things.
I mean, there've definitely been moments where I've kind of looked back at the room and thought, maybe this wasn't the time to bring the baby. Like, as a paper has been delivered to sort of a group of journalists and a politician. But I'm learning.
I love it. Laura, you don't have to talk about this if you don't want to, but have you found at any point in kind of learning, coming into the rural sector, that you've experienced any kind of like imposter syndrome or like questioning your own kind of ability, or do you feel like you're kind of getting there with the grounding of knowledge that's allowing you to kind of show up confidently in most of these places that you are showing up?
I would say yes, 100%. I constantly feel some element of imposter syndrome. I struggled at the beginning because I left a job that I was doing quite well in. You know, I was pretty good at my job. I wasn't the best, but I was all right. And then I came out of that, and then I went into this role right at the bottom with no knowledge, and I was constantly having to ask for help, and that was difficult. And I do feel like I'm more confident and more knowledgeable every time, you know, every week almost. And I'm quite determined to sort of to keep improving. But yes, like, you know, I'm amazed, for example, like to be nominated for an award like the Helping It Happen award. I did think that they might have made a mistake. I actually thought that I'd accidentally nominated myself, because I was nominating lots of people and I got a message saying you've been nominated. I thought, oh God, I've just gone and put my own email address in.
No, but I think Laura, that I have a lot of respect for you going back to the beginning of something, because it's so easy to stick in something we know that we're good at. You know, like you say, you get validation every day from people saying, you know, you're doing a great job, or from viewing figures, or any of those things, whatever it may be, whatever sector you're in, and to kind of take the plunge and go back to the beginning is really tough. And so I think you're incredible that you've chosen to do that, and that you didn't make Jack do it.
Well, it was obviously, I mean, I do think it's like it's a huge privilege and a luxury to be able to go back to study. So I'm very grateful for that opportunity, because it's not possible for everyone. And I don't think the qualification would necessarily makes me kind of better at something, but it got my ear in, and I'm really, really glad I did it.
Laura, given everything that you've done with Next Generation, this final question is incredibly fitting for you, and it's one that we ask all our guests. So what is the one piece of advice you would give to the next generation of rural women in Scotland?
I'd say if you really want something to happen, then it's not going to fall into your lap, and you've got to go after it. You've got to pick up the phone, write that email, and don't, you know, let any fear or worry about what someone might think get in your way. I mean, they can only say no, and then you just, you know, pick yourself up off the floor and start again. But you're not going to know unless you try. I'd also say that there's no point in being frustrated or angry that this is a world that traditionally has been dominated by men forming opinion and making the decisions. I mean, there have been women involved for generations, but generally the opinions and the decision making has been done by men. In my experience, it's not been the way to get the best out of people. But just your presence is beginning to address that balance. And you are then an inspiration to the next generation and they to the next. And rural Scotland will only be a better place for it.
Well, Laura, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your stories, experiences and lessons.
Thank you very much for having me.
If you would like to connect with Laura, you will find her details in the show notes.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, follow us on Instagram @Women in Wellies Podcast to stay up to date with all the latest news.
And you can email us with any questions on womeninwelliespodcast@gmail.com, and we'd love it if you could leave us a review and subscribe so you never miss an episode.
Until next time.